It's not NBA Tales from the Couch. We already gave you that on Tuesday. We have a lot of NFL stuff we're doing. Pioli, as we already mentioned, and Atala in the intro here. But I just wanted to talk about Durant's return to Phoenix. Phoenix gets a win last night against Minnesota, 107-100. This was a game. It really was a game there for the most part. He was not great, which spit in the face of my Durant looks like first-team All-NBA every time he comes back from an injury. His cardio looked fine. He played 29 minutes. He had 16 points. He was 5 of 18. And I'm going to go over a couple of the last few things they did in this game. Whatever. I mean, Durant, I'm not worried about him now all of a sudden not being a good shooter. He couldn't make any shots last night. I'm sure it was maybe jitters and the home debut or whatever, but the whole thing has been really weird, which speaks to the West. We'll kind of get to that as well here. Karl Anthony Towns has been back. Man, he looks huge. He looks huge. If I were a hacky sports writer, would I say Karl Anthony Pounds? No, I wouldn't do that. But he's getting 20 a game, and he's making all of his threes. He's 50% from threes in the first 3 games back, man. 17 shots a game. He's at 31 minutes a game, so Towns is just back there in it, running, getting in shape out there. But you can kind of see the formation of the Timberwolves, who I spent a lot of time on Tuesday, of Towns, Gobert, Edwards, who was sick last night, and a couple other guys were sick as well. Conley, Noel, McLaughlin, McDaniels. I think you're like, all right, I kind of see it. It's not my favorite thing of all time, but it's so weird that we're like 2 weeks to go and there's all of these teams with the rotations being like, does this group finally have all of their guys together? And then what's it going to look like? And we're going to be picking playoff series. And I feel like not only does it feel closer in the West, like it's just, there's not going to be a lot to go on. Like, oh, they split the series or they won the season series 3-1. Be like, look at who played and who didn't. It may not mean anything with some of these playoff matchups. So at the end of the game, Durant comes back in at 3:21. It's going to be Ayton. It's going to be Durant. It's going to be Booker. It's going to be Chris Paul. I know weeks and weeks ago when the trade was actually made, I was like, the curious thing will be kind of who they use with the 5th guy, but it's going to be a Kogi. I don't really think they would do something else unless they just felt great about Terrence Ross's shooting in a matchup and that they weren't giving up too much defensively with him. I mean, TJ Warren, we know, can score. He's been better recently, but at the same time, like, TJ's, if he's out there as the 5th option, which is what he would be offensively, is it worth it to have him out there? And that's why I think Okogie's defense makes the most sense, because if you're looking at what Minnesota wanted to do defensively, like Durant wasn't really much of an option to close this game. And Booker only had like 1 shot, and then there was a miss a little bit later. So I think he only had 3 total shots in the 4th quarter. So if you were looking for like the Booker takeover, it didn't happen. It was the Chris Paul Ayton deal again. Now, Chris Paul, when he sees Gobert dropping, then Chris Paul's more locked in. And I'm telling you, the thing that's been most frustrating about Chris Paul not looking good certain nights has been, wait, you're going to be hesitant about your offense? He's always been somebody that wants to defer. But when he goes into his mid-range pull-up knowing he's doing it off of the screen versus somebody dropping in a center, as a center, specifically last night with Gobert, when he goes into that knowing what he wants to do, he's just a much better shooter. There's been too many times recently where it's like, did you not know what you wanted to do? And the last 3 minutes of this game last night, he knew exactly what he wanted to do every single time. He was orchestrating all of it, and he was figuring things out. And it's why I thought it was really interesting. There was a screen that Okogie sent for Paul, and then they got it back to Okogie, who took a mid-range, 2, which is what they all are, and he missed it. And then you're like, okay, wait. You have Booker out there, you have Ayton, you have Durant, and Okogie setting the screen, and then he becomes the option as to stay with Chris Paul. Like, we will not see that again. And guess what? We didn't. We didn't see it. But it was a lot of Ayton stuff, which is, going to be good sometimes. Touch is incredible, moves really well, and then other times he's going to fumble the basketball, and then they're going to go the other way, and then Kyle Anderson got tied up, lost the ball. Then they went back the other way. Chris Paul missed the layup because he had Anthony Edwards tracking him down. So that's kind of how they closed it, by Chris Paul orchestrating things, but Durant wasn't making shots. Booker didn't even take a ton of them. Ayton's fumbling things away, and this was actually a good basketball game, and it was competitive, but it was kind of a nice little sign there from Phoenix. The rest of the way, if you wake up today, Phoenix is your 4 seed. They have 6 games to go. How about this stretch? Denver at OKC, San Antonio, Denver again at the Lakers, and then against the Clippers. This is going around on social media right now. I have to double check it, but it doesn't mean I'm not going to share it right now. Apparently, the largest free throw differential in the season right now is the Lakers at 411 more free throw attempts than their opponents. Number 2 on that list, the Sacramento Kings. Kings are always getting calls. They're plus 193. Yes, you heard that right. The gap between the Lakers and the Kings. So, Rudy, can you actually double check this just to make sure I'm not sharing false information? We don't like that. It shows a differential of, that would be 219 more free throws. But they didn't get that call after LeBron traveled in Boston. So that's a tough stretch, but it's actually only the 9th toughest remaining strength of schedule, which is kind of shocking. New Orleans is number 1. Look at what Philly has to do. Milwaukee, Boston, the Nets, Miami, Atlanta, Toronto, all playoff teams. But I know I should wait. I know I should wait longer. I know I should wait on all these teams. I'm doing it, though, and so is FanDuel. They're plus 240. Denver's plus 280. Golden State's plus 480. Memphis is plus 600. The Clippers, who were the 5 seed, nice win in Memphis last night. Westbrook went off. I don't know if he ended up missing any threes. And then the Lakers. So those are your top 6. Who's missing from that? Sacramento, plus 2,000. Then Dallas. Then Minnesota, New Orleans. On and on and on. Portland, you could still get odds on. That would seem like maybe not the best move to win the Western Conference. So, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to go ahead and pick it. And then as I was saying that, I was like, well, everybody's going to think you're just doing this because of Chris Paul. I was like, no, I just think I'm going to do it because I'm not sure about any of those other teams. If there was some other team for 6 months that had every guy playing 70-plus games and they were really good and won almost 60 games and they didn't have any massive flaw, I would go ahead and maybe pick that team. But I don't think that team necessarily exists, despite Denver kind of going, not wire to wire, but feeling wire to wire the last, 3 months of the season here. But Durant did a sit-down with Shams Charania on The Athletic. It came out this morning, and there's a bunch of different topics that were covered. And the reason I'm even bringing this up, because I was thinking about Durant, was like, I guess I am still rooting for Durant, right? I root for Durant. I like him. I think he's more real than a lot of dudes. Doesn't mean there aren't things that he's said or have done where I'm like, what are you doing? But when I thought about the pick for Durant to come out, and if you were in the NBA Finals, like how many people would be rooting for him? Now, in general, how many people root for Durant? It's all based on like, is he in your team's way, right? So there's a lot of you listening to this, be like, I'm not rooting for that guy, right? And that makes sense. You're going to root for some other guy on another team, maybe going to screw with your team's plans and your own happiness. Very standard stuff there. But if you were neutral about this or your team were out of it, would people be looking at Durant being like, hey, I'd like to see him get a ring that's like a post-Golden State ring? And would that feel like it solidifies him a little bit more? Because he's been asked about, his thoughts on things. And one quote here about the Warriors I thought was interesting. Here's Durant. Once I left to go to the Warriors in 2016, I figured any logical thing when it comes to me is out of the window. When it comes to me, people are not going to think in a logical way or simply look at what I've done and say that's it. They got to add a narrative to it. They got to push something to discredit me. Once I left to go to the Warriors, it's been gymnastics on how to discredit me every step of the way. It's like, damn, that's not even fun no more, like engaging with people because y'all aren't even being truthful. You move the goalpost every time. You expect the most out of me, and if I don't reach it, I'm a failure. It's like, what's the problem? Some of that I get, and some of it I just don't. And it's really simple. Like, you're going to have to pay some sort of public tax when you went to the Warriors. And in the moment, I was always okay with it because I understood that he really didn't want to play with Westbrook anymore, which is what I would think any great player would be like, I don't want to do this. I was more okay with it then, where retroactively, like, I kind of get it from everybody. I mean, imagine if Jokic, Giannis, and say Luka all decided to have their contracts expire in the same year, 2 years from now, and then they all just played together. If that happened, it'd be really interesting. I would watch it. We would talk about it a lot. And if they won a couple rings, we would look at them differently than Giannis's ring by himself, or Jokic getting a ring right now, or Luka figuring out how to get a ring in Dallas. I mean, it's just what it is, man. That's what it is. This isn't that complicated. It's not about goalposts or narratives or all this stuff. Like, some of the shit Durant deals with is bullshit and isn't fair and is dismissive. But we all kind of lean towards, when I was talking about Lillard not that long ago, like, we put you in the tiers and then we rank you inside of the tiers. Because it's like, what do you want to hear me do? Box score plus minus for an hour? Nobody wants to fucking listen to that. So that's the part where I think it's hard for him to hear it. And he's out there looking like the best player in the world, winning a couple championships. Probably should have had one more with the whole deal. But then when we stack those up against other people, like that's just the tax that he has to pay with that decision. And I fucking defended him. And I sometimes wonder if I was wrong about that. So, look, man, it's pretty simple. I'll be rooting for him, even though I disagree with him at times. And I also think it's the right basketball pick if they're healthy.